Alright, we are live. I'll wait for a couple of people to tune in here. Have to excuse me for a minute. This is the first time I've actually done one of these on purpose. Hey Mike, how's it going? Hopefully my sound is okay. Okay, we're getting some people coming in now. Hey, it just takes me a second here just to make sure I'm set up and everything's where I want it. Okay, so anyway, I'll go ahead and get started. One of the first reasons I decided to do this live stream is I was getting quite a few requests to do one, and I think my YouTube channel is starting to get a following, but no one really has a connection yet with who's running it per se. So I thought this would be a good thing to do and kind of give everyone a background of who I am and what the point of all of this is. So I'm just going to go through tonight, I'm just going to go through a quick introduction, give some information on my guide business, kind of the history of where I came from, and what some of the goals for 2017 are and where I want to take this, and then I can take some questions here at the end of toward the end. If you don't know, my name is Ty Conkle, and I am 32 years old, live here in Morristown, Tennessee, so kind of in the heart of catfishing country here. I've been here in Tennessee since 2008, originally from Arizona, out in a little town in the southeast corner called Benson. Not a whole lot of catfishing per se out there, but there is some, and that's kind of where I got started with it. I am also a born-again Christian, believe in Jesus Christ, and He is the biggest part of my life and the one I seek to honor with all of this. My main work that I do is with a large commercial roofing company, doing commercial industrial roofing, and this has kind of been on the side, but it's starting to pick up some steam. I work as a project manager over there, and thankfully this year I've got a better pay schedule worked out, and I'm hopefully going to be able to do more videos, be a little bit more into this whole thing, and also do some additional guide trips. Let's see here, I'm having a little bit of a problem, just a minute. Okay, give you a little bit of information on my setup. I guess it's been about 2011 is when I really got going into catfishing real heavily. I've been involved in it most of my life, but 2011 is when I really started getting going with it. The first actual guide trip I ran was in 2014, and I originally had no intents intention of guiding. Wasn't anything I was really looking into doing, but kind of interesting how things come about. I've always loved taking people out with me, enjoyed watching them catch fish, and we someone suggested I should start doing it, and decided I'd give it a whirl. So I'll get into that a little bit later here, but right now I'm running an 18-foot center console. It is a Bayhawk, pretty good boat. It wasn't exactly what I wanted at first, but my other boat had gotten into an accident on the dock, got totaled out, and I was in a real hurry to get back on the water again. I ended up getting this one. It's worked out really well. Just recently this year upgraded to a 115 horsepower Suzuki 4-stroke, and I just absolutely love that video. I just love that video, or that motor. That thing is awesome. The gas mileage I'm getting with that thing, it's quiet, just night and day difference between what I had before. I also have a iPilot GPS Minn Kota trolling motor. That thing's been a great help to me. This last year when I upgraded to it, I think I owe that trolling motor a lot of credit for a lot of the fish that have been brought in. I also run Humminbird Helix side imaging. Just upgraded to that not long ago. I was running a 798 prior to that, so I'm getting more and more comfortable with running that Helix. Took a little bit of time to get used to. Gonna go into real quick the locations that I guide on. I cover Watts Bar, Chickamauga, Nickajack, and Upper Gunnersville. And that's all in East Tennessee on the Tennessee River. I keep it within the state lines. I don't go down into Alabama at all, but I stay up under those reservoirs, mostly based around Chattanooga, I think, more than anything. If you haven't checked out website for information, it's www.fv-catfish.com, or you can leave the dash out, fvcatfish.com. It'll route it to the same location. I have a couple of sponsors. B&M is my biggest sponsor, Driftmaster Rod Holders. I have a couple other smaller endorsements from a few others. Working on this year, hopefully picking up a couple more. B&M has been really good to me. I was using their gear long before they actually came to me. Love all their rods. I kind of got my start in guiding with a good friend of mine, Richard Sims, Scenic City Fishing Charters, and we're affiliated together. It helps us both out. If I have trips I can't handle, he takes them. Same thing in reverse. If he can't handle them, then I take them. We share information. It's worked out really well to have that partnership. There's a few other guides that we work with, and it's really helped us out. No secrets between us. We share, we learn, and instead of one person trying to learn everything, it's like four of us. So, but he mostly covers down there around Chattanooga. I'll cover everything from Knoxville on down. Also have a couple of very large aquariums here in the house. Keep a couple of flatheads, pretty good sized blue, some bass, panfish, and that's been helpful to me to start learning how to study their habits. Probably learn more about flathead fishing from my aquarium than probably anything else. So go real quick into what in this last year has been a very challenging year, but a year of a lot of growth at the same time. I ended up running uh, 32 paid charters, did a bunch of others for learning, for scouting, and other odds and ends, some media and some other things, but 32 actual paid charters. Doesn't seem like a lot, but that's about all my schedule could really do most of the year, working full time doing something else. Hopefully this year I'm going to have a little bit of availability to run a couple of more. I'd like to see about 50 of them this year. I think it's very doable if I can free my schedule up. Last year I also was down a good chunk of the year. Back in January I was recovering from back surgery. Really didn't feel like doing any guiding trips till almost March when I started feeling good. And so I was kind of out first 2 months of the year. Then I think it was July, my engine went down. I was out almost 2 months getting a new motor. If you didn't know, the new motor that I got when it came in, it got in some shipping damage, and it took a while to get all that sorted out. So this year I'm hoping to keep my equipment spending down. That would be really good. And run some extra trips this year. I've got a lot of media stuff coming up. Got some magazine writers I'm taking out. Got a couple of TV programs that I'm planning to do this year as well. And that's all going to be good. Should get some more exposure out there. I'd like to. The YouTube channel is kind of something that when I first started doing the YouTube channel, it wasn't really to put out video. It was more of a storage, so I could go back and look at everything later. Didn't really have any intention of making it supposedly public, but people would want to see the videos, and so started sharing them, started making them public. There's quite a few of them I haven't, but when I got into the guiding a little bit, clients would want to see them, so started kind of taking off with it. And I guess I've been involved with YouTube almost since it started one way or another. Just didn't realize, I guess, the extent of what you could do with it. But I would say probably out of the trips that I have booked, probably half of them have actually came from people like you watching and wanting to take a trip, getting in contact and setting one up. So I noticed that YouTube could be a good source of business coming in, but I want to do something different with the channel this year. I'd like to see it grow, but my channel mostly up to this point has been fairly just entertainment. You just get to see fish after fish caught, but not so much informational. And I think a lot of people like myself come to YouTube for two reasons: either for entertainment or to learn. I have a couple of how-to videos up, but I haven't actually done too many of those, and the ones that I did really, frankly, weren't very good. So one of my goals this year to work on is to put more informational stuff out there. A lot of guides are real hesitant putting up too much information on YouTube out of fear of it hurting their business, but I really don't look at it that way. I see that helping people out, there's a few people that book trips with me that know how to catfish, do it all the time, and they still like coming along either for the company or for the convenience of not having to do everything. People that just love the water. So I really don't see it as a threat per se. I don't really have a whole lot of secrets to hide. I think a lot of it just comes down to respecting other people's fishing locations and things like that. I try not to intrude on anybody else, but there's something to learn from everybody. And certainly for me, I wouldn't be anywhere near I was if everyone kept a tight lip and was unwilling to share any information. One of the most influential people to me was Richard Sims and a guy by the name of Eric Maurer. If you don't know who Eric Maurer is, if you go on to the Tennessee angler recognition program where they keep track of all the trophies. You look at the blue catfish section, he's the one that fills page after page after page after page of trophy entries. And he's kind of the one that really gave me encouragement, actually pointed me in the exact place to go try to get on my first trophy catfish. Because when you catch that first one, that first big fish on your own, that's a really good feeling. And that gives you the encouragement, like, hey, I can do it. And you get out and you do it again, and little by little, each time you go out, you start to grow. And we've grown phenomenal. To be able to cover 3 major reservoirs, still got a lot to learn about them, but I have a pretty good handle on good bucket list of things to go, places to try. Um, so this year, about a year, take that back, about a year ago, I think I was sitting at about, I don't know, I want to say 400 or 500 subscribers about this time. We're up to about 1,500. I'm really hoping, so that's about double, more than double of where I was. I'm hoping this year to double it again. I'd like to see about 3,000 subscribers. I'm not the fastest growing channel out there, but would like to see some additional growth. And hopefully this year it can be a more help to my viewers. But the truck that I'm pulling my boat with right now is a 1990 Chevy 1500. It has about 660,000 miles on it. Original engine. The engine's not been rebuilt. Rebuilt the transmission a couple of times. But that's a lot of miles, especially towing. And I got a feeling maybe this year I'm going to have to finally bite the bullet and go get another vehicle. Where I'm located out of to where I guide sometimes it's 2.5 hours away. So on any trip, driving 5 hours a day, just the drive starts adding up pretty quick. I think that kind of gives you an outlook of what I'm planning to do this year and what I'd like to see accomplished, kind of an introduction. Don't know that we'll go all the way to 8 o'clock, but if anybody's got any questions, I think we'll go ahead and jump into those. Kent, you said that you asked if I run an 83 on my 2D. I do. Mine is a Switchfire, got the Switchfire on it, so I'm just starting to get used to using that a little bit, but that's been really helpful the last trip out that I took with it, to be able to start doing the bottom bouncing, because I could really see my bait down there. Dynamis Fishing, hey, how's it going? You been out at all lately? Back in, I think the first flathead catfish I ever caught actually was 6 inches long on a night crawler. Okay. Yeah, it's been really cold around here. I didn't get out at all this last weekend. I think Saturday night we got down to about, I think it was around 2 degrees. So it's been super cold. I prefer not to get out. Some people are pretty hardcore and they like to get out during that stuff and have frozen lines and reels and deal with all that kind of thing. But more than actually being on the water, the problem I've had is the boat ramps. If you're the first person to drag your boat up on a day that it's 10 degrees out, if you're not the first person, somebody ahead of you does that, pulls all that water up onto the ramp and it freezes. I've been stuck. I had one time down on the boat ramp, I thought I'd never get out of there, so I've been kind of cautious about that. If I don't get out, if I'm not the first person out, I try to avoid going on really bad days like that. Done it. It's not my favorite right now. Um, See over here on this board. Yeah, we're still covered with snow right now. I keep my boat hangered in a hangar um, with my airplane. I'm also a pilot, and I have a small Cessna, and so the boat gets to kind of hang out and live with the airplane. So pretty good combination, but really helps keep it out of the sun and good and safe, easy to pull out, easy to go. I live right across the street from the airport, and so I can be at my boat or my plane within 5 minutes. Hey Joe, good to see you on too. I'm running 2 chat boxes, so kind of getting some from both. Looks like I got about 25 watching on one, and I got a few others on the other. Top fishing. He asked if what are my tactics for catching catfish in the wintertime. Well, during the wintertime, I mostly stop drifting. A lot of people still do it, but here in the wintertime on the reservoirs that we're on, a lot of current flows through them, and the fish, as they start to lose their metabolism goes down, they start to get a little bit lethargic, and you don't pick up near as many drifting. So I change over to mostly complete anchor fishing during the winter time. Kind of kind of depends on how to exactly locate them. Uh, One day they're deep, the next day they're in the shallows. Usually when the weather's real cold, kind of nasty out, they kind of start hunkering down into the holes. During the warm days, they'll start coming up into the shallows to feed. Like this last weekend, I would expect to have found them fairly deep with as cold as it's been. This week's supposed to warm up a lot. I expected to probably start coming up in the water column toward the channel edges and possibly even move out onto the flats. Marco, yeah, do I like to use stink baits or dip baits for channel catfish? Back when I lived in Arizona, I used to use a lot of stink baits and dough baits. Since I've been out here, I've gotten away from that a lot. I mostly use natural baits, and what I mean by natural is cut bait, catching bluegill, panfish, um, something like that, shad, and using as natural as I can. It's been a while since I've actually used any stink baits or dip baits. Channel catfish are probably the least sought after fish around here. We usually go for the blues or the flatheads, and the channel catfish, we tend to pick up plenty of them on natural baits. And when I say natural, not always stuff found in the river. Using things like cut chicken, chicken liver, stuff like that. In my opinion, that's sort of a natural bait. It's not an artificial bait, I guess is what I'm saying. Um, let's see. Kentwood, I have never actually used. Hold on a second here. I just lost my feed here. Just a second. Okay. No, I've never actually used any downriggers before. I did start this year going into experimenting with the planer boards. There's quite a few people out there that are really starting to get into the planer board thing. I've messed with it a little bit in the past. This year I started doing a little more of it. But there's a couple of guys out there, especially Zach Royce, guys like that have really taken the planer board and made it popular this year. So I think one of the biggest things that's probably exploded in the catfishing world in this last year has probably been the planer boards. And hopefully this year I'm going to start experimenting a little bit more with that. This time of year, the winter, when the reservoirs are flowing really well, they don't work that great. But when we start getting into the late spring, when things start to slow down, fish get active, planer boards are something I'm probably going to start digging out more. Do I think bream are as good as shad for cut bait? Absolutely. In fact, this time of year, I will mostly use bream or other panfish. I love skipjack during the winter, though. I haven't found the last couple of trips out. I've been using a lot of panfish, and I've been fishing them side by side with shad or skipjack, and I have not done. I think my catch ratio has been twice that on bream as it is on the skipjack. What hooks do I use? That's kind of an interesting question. Right now, I'm using Team Catfish, mostly the double action circle hooks. I've had good success with those. Been using Team Catfish probably since probably late 2012, maybe, yeah, probably late 2012. I've been almost exclusively using the double action circle hook. However, I've not been committed to any one particular hook or tackle brand for my terminal tackle yet. Don't have a sponsorship with any of them, so I've been kind of flexible. I've got somebody just sent me some new hooks this week to try out. If you're not familiar with them, or if you are, I'd kind of be interested to know if anyone's had any success with them. Hooker's Terminal Tackle. They're the trying to think what they're called now. The name's completely skipping me at the moment. But he sent me a couple of packs of hooks, and they look really interesting. So I'm going to be getting out a couple of days this week, and we're going to be trying them out and see how those things work. Let's see. It takes my other dialog box a minute here to pop up. Something's got, I don't know if it's the live stream, got my computer running a little bit slow at the moment. Not two people asked at the same time my favorite line to use. Well, right now I'm using the Bass Pro Shops 30-pound high visibility green mono. I'm kind of a big fan of monofilament. I have experimented around with the braided. I do use braided on my bouncing rods, my lines that go directly down that I need to feel the sensitivity with the bottom, but I've not had a real good success with using braided on my anchor rods. A couple of reasons, but I prefer to stick with the monofilament for my anchor rods, and I use the braided for my bottom bouncers. Reaper hooks, yeah, that's the one he has out, but I'm trying to think what the name of the other one is. The Mad Catters, that's what it is. The Mad Catter 10-aught dual action. So I'm kind of interested to see how those work. Thanks for telling me what that was. What braid do I use? I use the Power Pro on my down rods, either 60 or 80 pound test. Power Pro. I really like the way it feels. Um, like I said earlier, I am sponsored by B&M. I do use their rods. I really like them. They are they got a good variety to choose from. My bottom bouncing rods, they actually have a bouncing rod specifically for doing that bottom bouncing, and the braided works pretty good in those stainless steel, solid stainless steel eyes. They've improved the rod this year compared to the one that they had the year before. I had a couple of the little stainless steel inserts pop out on the last series of rods, but they fixed that this year. David, no, I have not actually fished any tournaments yet. I've kind of stayed away from the whole tournament thing. I might this year. I've had a couple invitations to go. I might end up doing that this year. But up to this point, no, I have not. Have I ever eaten flathead catfish belly meat? No, I've not actually eaten flathead. I've had blue catfish in the past and channel catfish. I've not actually eaten a flathead, but from what everyone tells me, they're the best. Okay. If you go onto my website, www.fvcatfish.com, and you go over to the rates page, that is where you can see what the rates are. Collaborations, I am hoping to do a couple this year. Been trying to get with a couple of people. One of my biggest problems has actually been my work schedule. My work schedule's kind of crazy. Working in the kind of the construction industry, doing what I'm doing consumes some time. Sometimes it's kind of hard to schedule that stuff, especially if I need to go out of town. So I'm hoping to talk a couple of people into getting with this year that can get down here. Fabian, yes, I am going to the Catfish Conference this year. Mike just asked that as well. Yep, I will be. I am planning to go. I did not go to the one last year, but it was a big success. Last year, I was still recovering from back surgery, and just I wasn't really in the mood to be going around doing that when it happened. I think they're going to have a much larger location this year, and I expect a really good turnout because almost everyone I know in the catfishing world is planning to be there. So if you want to go fish some great catfishing spots, I think if you don't go to that, you could probably go out because there probably ain't going to be anybody else out there fishing. Reels, the only reel I'm running right now on my large anchor rods is the Akuma CLX 300L, and I think they have a variation of that called the LA. I've had great success with those things. I finally, after like 4 years straight of using them, I don't do any maintenance to them, nothing. I finally got one kind of squeaking a little bit, so I need to go oil it. But other than that, no issues at all with them. They cost less than $40. You can get them on Amazon. Some dealers carry them. Been a great reel. I know there's some other really good reels out there that are expensive, but I've also lost a couple of rods and reels. People have dropped them overboard, fish had pulled them out of the boat, whatever. I kind of hate spending a couple $100 on a reel that I risk losing or getting some sort of an abuse, because doing this is kind of rough on gear. So I've had kids step on rods, and I've had all kinds of weird stuff happen. Best scale to weigh big catfish. Well, I've had a big game scale that I've used. That thing was so big it was just kind of impractical. Believe it or not, one of my main scales that I use is you can go to Walmart in the luggage section. It's like an 85-pound analog scale. Got the dial on it. That thing's worked great. I also have a 110-pound scale. I'm trying to think of the brand of that, but it's a little bit about this big around. Looks kind of like one of those ones you see at the grocery store, but kind of smaller. So if I catch one bottoms out my 85-pound scale, I'll pull that on it. If it bottoms that scale out, I'm probably going to be calling the TWRA for a state record anyway. So I don't really care if I have a scale over 110 pounds. But that little scale I got at Walmart, that's done it all. I mean, huge fish, small fish, it's inexpensive. You don't have to worry about the batteries going out on it. Do I think a lever drag reel is overkill? I've used the lever drags before. A couple friends of mine use them. Really, for catfishing, it's simple. I think lever drag's probably a little overrated. I've done fine with the Star drag reels. The lever drags seem to have a lot of maintenance issues, and he seemed to go through a couple of reels I think a reel would probably last him 2 years maybe, and those lever drags started giving all kinds of issues, so he kept replacing them. I think he just changed over and ordered some of these Akuma ones. Use a piece of conduit pipe with my big game scale. Yeah, I've done that too. However, when they start getting that big to where I need that, I'm gonna need some help anyway. I've popped my back out once, and I'm trying to be a little nicer to it than I used to be in the past. Yes, I do know Joe with Chat Cats. He's a very good friend of mine. Him and I think, have been... I think it was 2012, basically, when we first got together, I think. And back then, he was just getting started in it. I'd been in it for about 4 years at that point. Biggest fish for 2016. Well, the biggest blue I boated last year was only 68 pounds. Every year prior to that, I've had at least one go over 80. But this year was kind of rough. We had a really bad drought here in Tennessee, and it kind of really interfered with the catfish's feeding behavior. The lakes got really clear. It started during the daytime when I was doing a lot of trips. Most people want to go out during the day. It was difficult to get on the big ones. They seemed to hunker down during the day in that clear water. Very little current. Some days there wasn't any current. It made it tough. Found that the best bite was coming at nighttime. But most of those ended up being personal trips with the exception of a couple. Most people want to get out, like I said, during the day, during the good hours, business hours. But sometimes the catfish don't always do business when we think it's our business time. Largest flathead I boated in 2016 was 72 pounds. So actually beat it with got a larger flathead than a blue, if that says anything about the year. But there were only couple of fish for months. I think going from May through into September, there was a while there when we were trying to, anybody I knew was trying to find a 50 pounder. It was just that difficult at times. And then here as the fall picked up, things really started picking up again. And we've been on them pretty good here. What's your take on a slip sinker rig using a 4-ounce weight running circle hooks? Well, that's pretty much my base rig right there is a slip sinker rig. I use the sinker slides that you can clip the sinker on and off. I used to use the Team Catfish ones, but them things just broke off. There are times they break in a cast or whatever. You just barely get them hung and they break off. And I switched over to using from Bottom Dwellers Tackle their sinker slides, much better quality. And I usually use 4 ounces. Really depends on the current or how far I'm trying to get. Obviously with heavier weight you can cast farther if you're on the bank. But 4 to 5 ounces is my typical weight that I'll run. How long will I spend at a spot without getting a bite before I move? Usually, that's kind of the fun of guiding, is when you're on a guide trip, there's this bit of pressure to start putting a fish in the boat as fast as you can. Once you get that skunk off, and especially if you can put a decent fish in the boat, start to relax a little bit and feel a little more free. Good spots that I know really work. If I know that they're consistent, most of the time 15 minutes max. That's usually where I put my clock. If I don't get a bite in that time, they're just not there. They're not active enough. If I sat there long enough, they probably move in. There's been places where I've sat, no fish, come back in 4 hours later and they're sitting there. So I try 15-20 minutes, I'd say is probably my average, unless I get a bite. There's been spots I've sat for probably upwards of 2 hours when they're feeding. They keep rolling through. Night fishing, I'm usually a little more patient. During the day, fish tend to group up around structure, so if you're casting on them and they're not biting, it's time to probably move on. At night, as fish are more active, they're moving around, or on cloudy, overcast days, when they're really feeding, you can be a little more patient on a spot, because usually they'll move on through. If I'm marking a lot of bait, especially marking fish, I will set on a spot a little bit longer. What is the best way to deal with bugs at night? Well, I am rarely affected by the bugs. I can have somebody else on the boat with me and they're just getting torn up, and I'm just sitting there like, I don't know what the big deal is. They've never really bothered me. This year though, I've got a couple of things I want to try. One guy I know uses a bug light, hangs it off the side of the boat, and actually has a blast catching panfish. He's got like a fishing light down there, has that bug light. They get zapped, fall into the water. Does that while he's waiting. I might try that. Usually if I am having a problem, just a little bit of bug spray works better than anything. Location's really good too. If I'm around a dam at night, some reason the bugs never bother me. If I'm kind of not down close to the bank, I can be on one side of the river, depending on the way the wind's blowing, and all the bugs are there, move over to the other side and there's nothing. What is my tactic when I see big blue catfish on a depth finder, but not biting because of a cold front? A couple weeks ago I was out and having that exact problem. There was a cold front, kind of missed the onset of the cold front. Usually when you come from high pressure and that pressure first starts dropping down, the bite goes crazy. But if you miss out on that, you can get to a spot as the pressure continues to drop. that they just seem to hunker down and won't bite. Um, Believe it or not, there's been a couple of times when, if the current isn't bad, where I free lined and caught more fish that they won't hit when there's a sinker. Usually, sometimes on a cold front, if they're there and you're placing baits and they're not eating, um, maybe try swapping up the bait. But usually I just gotta go find some place that they are eating. And there are those days when you go out and you put fish in the boat but just can't seem to get the big ones to bite. And I don't know what you do about it. You just gotta have enough in your arsenal to start pulling around, hopefully finding one that wants to cooperate. When I'm fishing in current with live bait, where will I hook it? In current with live bait, I usually go in the mouth, um, depending on how much current. If it's a little bit of current, I like hooking right behind the dorsal fin. That gives if it's hanging there, it gives the most natural presentation. A fish with the hook in its mouth can't breathe properly. They don't seem to last as long as when I hook them behind the dorsal fin. But when they're in the dorsal fin and current, they do their own thing. Sometimes it feels like it takes 16 ounces of weight to keep a bluegill down. So in heavy current, in the mouth tends to slow it down. Most situations, I like to hook the bait behind the dorsal fin to give it the most natural presentation. Pen reels, I've got a couple. They're a little bit older ones. Never had any trouble with them, but I don't use them anymore because they're kind of keepsakes. Sorry to hear about your problem with the Akuma reels. I can't speak for all of the reels. The ones that I use haven't had a problem with. Like I said, I think there's a lot of good reels out there. I do, on my bouncing rods, I use Abu Garcia. They're just small little, the thumb release seems to be the easiest. I haven't had any trouble with those reels. Do I set my reels at strike or engaged when I'm fishing the bottom? There are times where I free spool, specifically for trophy catfishing. Those days, backing up to that one question, when they're not biting because of a cold front, if the current doesn't allows you to be able to leave it on free spool, or maybe with the bait clicker set, there's been a lot of times on those real sensitive bites that having it on free spool, allow them to take it and not feel that resistance, I'll get better hookups. In current, seems like when there's more current, fish are always, when they bite, they're a little more aggressive. I like to leave them engaged, especially with circle hooks, and let it do its work. But I do free spool from time to time in low current, and when the bite's a little tough, let them play with it a little bit. Sometimes not always the small ones that are playing with it. I've had some big ones kind of dink around with it for a little while before finally swimming off with it. What do I use for my leader line? I use, again, I use monofilament. Most of my anchor rods are 60-pound mono, 30-pound main line. Length of the leader typically is, I'd say it averages around 14 inches. If I'm fishing near structure with live bait, and I don't want that bait going all over the place, you might want to shrink it up a little bit. Or in something real rocky where you don't want it flopping all over the place, getting into rocks and things. Again, what hooks do I like to use? Right now I'm using mostly the Team Catfish double action circle. Daiichi also has a hook that's identical to it. Really is the same hook, comes from the same place. And like I said, I'm going to be testing out the new hooks that I just received, the Mad Catter hooks. and I will be letting you all know how that goes. I really hope they work well. It's a smaller homegrown business that the guy James has going on, and I always like supporting that kind of thing. So if they work out well, I'll let you all know. Let's see. Let me catch up over here on this box. I'll take a few more questions and then we'll probably wrap it up for tonight. Okay. Second here, it's loading. How far do I go on a given trip? Um, I think most of my trips I try to keep around, usually round trip, depending on how much time, if it's a 4 hour trip or an 8 hour trip. But I'd say it probably averages no more than 15 river miles. What power rods do I like to use? Um, the rods I'm almost exclusively using are the B&M Silvercat Magnums. I've got the 7.5 footer one-piece rods and the 8 footer two-piece rods. I like both of them. The 8 footer has a little bit more flexitivity in it. I like the action of it. The 7.5 footers are a little bit more stiff. Okay. What is my biggest catfish fishing suspended? Let's see. Suspended. Um, I'd say my biggest one was a 74 pound blue I caught down on a wheeler. I've had I can think of a couple in the 60 pound range that I've had suspended, and a bunch of lots of fish underneath that. But I think the largest one suspended, it was down on wheeler at 7. No, I'll take that back. The 81 pounds on wheeler. The one I had a 74 down there as well. Suspend drifting. When fishing on the river, do I like to fish deep holes or current breaks? Um, Really depends. Our rivers around here are really reservoirs. It's all a river, but the lower end of the lakes by the dam tend to look more like a giant reservoir. Um, the upper end tends to get a little bit more riverine in almost every reservoir. So it feels like you're fishing a regular river near the top end of a lake. Feels like you're fishing a major reservoir down near the bottom. Uh, so when I'm fishing on those riverine sections, I usually try to stay around the deep holes, looking for secondary structure. And what I mean by that is, um, a hole, a deep stretch of river would be primary structure, but that hole, if it doesn't have some kind of secondary structure, some rock piles, some trees, something else down in it, they're usually not that productive. So on the riverine section, I try to stay around where holes are, either above or below it, depending on what the fish are doing that particular day. Current breaks are always really good. Current breaks, current seams, as they're called. If you can find some of those, especially upstream of a hole, if you can find some place where there's some kind of a current seam, that's where bait fish and stuff are going to congregate, and fish that are in that hole down in that structure will come up to feed. After winter, what temperature of water will I wait before starting to search for cats? I fish all winter long. Some of the best fishing is actually during the winter. But for the flatheads, they tend to hibernate a little bit more in the wintertime. Usually when the water starts getting up about 55 towards 60 degrees, the flatheads get really active around here. And once that water temp gets into the 60s, I'm really getting flathead fever really bad. Fluorocarbon and monofilament. I've not used the fluorocarbon for a leader yet. I use fluorocarbon for all my bait catching reels. It's real flexible, has very low memory. When you're fishing for bait, panfish, and that 4 or 6 pound line, regular mono gets a lot of memory in it, and that can really hinder your reel. So I've switched over and started using the fluoro for my bait setups, and that line works a whole lot better. Monofilament I prefer for the leaders. In my opinion, monofilament, this is my opinion, I know this is kind of controversial, but mono for me has more abrasion resistance than the braid does. Come cut bait never works for you. Well, like I was telling somebody earlier, cut bait's about entirely what I use. So I do know it works. Just gonna have to take some time and get on the right location, right day, I guess. But I think it's hard to beat. Somebody else asked why I don't prefer braid on my main line. I was having a lot of difficulty, especially in current, when a big fish would hit it with braided line and there was no stretch in the line at all, nothing to take out the shock. That line would tend to just snap. Big fish decides to turn real quick and it'd just pop it. And I was getting so tired of that happening that I finally swapped back over to my mono. I'm not using 50-pound mono for my main line anymore. I've gone down to 30-pound. I think 50-pound was a little bit overkill. I also am getting less hang-ups with the 30-pound because that 30-pound is a smaller diameter. There's not as much drag in the water. So I can tend, with a nice weight, I can keep it pinned a little bit easier. And frankly, I've caught plenty of big fish on the 30-pound. And if I do get it hung, I don't bust my back trying to get the line to pop with the 50-pound. 50 pounds hard to break. Choosing a boat, what should I look for? There's a lot of good boats out there. I'm not using one of the newer brands, but I have been on some of the other boats that I really love, the G3s. And probably when I go, and I'm hoping in the next couple of years I'm eventually going to upgrade again, I'm probably going to be looking at one of the G3s. But there's some really fine boats out there. Steve Douglas on his channel has had several different boats. Those things are dream boats, but I don't know that I'll ever be able to afford one. But I think a good used, if I can find either a used one or get a deal worked out, I think the G3s are probably what I'm going to go with on my next one. Okay, it's reloading up my page here, so hold on a minute. Quick, somebody asked, this is a good question, quick rundown of how a guided trip works. Yeah, that's a good question. Basically, you either give me a call, you can email to, we'll discuss the dates that work. When we agree on a date and a time, I just request the $50 deposit. That locks you in. A couple days prior to the trip, I'll reach back out to you and make sure that we're still on track and discuss where we're going to meet, what time. There's nothing you need to bring except appropriate clothing, and any additional drinks or food that you want. I carry water, stuff like that. But you provide the smile, uh, provide yourself the fishing license, and then I take care of the rest. You don't need to bring any bait, tackle, none of that stuff. Of course, you want to bring a camera. I might avoid answering that particular question. Doug, sorry about that. Yeah, I think I'll just avoid that question. Um, what pound braid were I using when it snapped? I think I think those I was using 60 pound is what I was um, loaded up with. But we're talking really fast current, catching fish in the 50 to 60 pound range. Um, and when those big fish would be under a lot of tension in that current, and then all of a sudden they'd roll or jerk to the side, it was so much pressure all at one time that I was just having it just snapping right and left. It just wasn't working in my particular application. So, not saying it does. Some people have great success with it. I've just not had that yet. And when I kept having it break off, it's expensive to replace. So the mono tend to work better for me. Okay, I'm gonna take one more, and then I think we're gonna call it a night here. This has been. Thank you all for joining in here. It's actually been very productive. I had more people on here than I was expecting, and hopefully we'll do another one again. I've got some giveaways and some offers to do on the next one, but this was kind of a trial run, see how things were going. And okay, I had one more come in here. What tips can I give a bank fisherman? Um, Local knowledge, I think, probably is the best thing that you can get when you're fishing from the bank. The bank can be extremely productive, though, on those warm days when the fish are coming up shallow. I think sometimes you can give the guys on a boat run for their money. Um, but I think if you can get a hold of some topographic maps of the river and navionics, something of that nature, locate some structure, some holes, things like that, fish upstream from that on the bank, I think that probably get you steered in the right direction. But of course, nothing compares to local knowledge you can pick up from other fishermen. It's really about community and working together. It doesn't need to be about pride, outdoing the next guy that comes along. It's about enjoying uh, the Lord's good creation and sharing it with everybody else, and that's what I love about guiding. I know that every time I go out guiding, I risk that I'm going to take somebody and they're going to come back and take what I've shown them and use it, and that's all good. Not there doesn't have to be a problem with that. So, all right, everyone. Well, I appreciate you tuning in, and hope you all have a good evening. Thanks for coming, and we'll be doing this again soon. God bless.